Planet Green Trees Show.
Governor, just quickly, what's a concrete question on policing? How can we address policing? You've identified the problem, but what's a policy change in policing that you would like to see enacted?
There's no question. We need training. We need better representation. I mean, we're working on a lot of this, but we've got a lot of work to go. I heard someone on your show not long ago talk about how you have to have a moral compass, and that's something you can't teach. People without it should not be with a badge and a gun, and that is a fact. And that's why we have to take a seriously look at ourselves, how we train, how we are inclusive, how we have representation, and how we hold people accountable.
Well, that was a better response than the general, Michael.
Well,
I'll give her that.
I mean, she wants us to look at ourselves. Okay, I can do that. That's not going to change anything. She wants to suggest that they have to have a moral compass when they're hired. How do you evaluate that?
Very difficult.
They're working on it. This is another thing you'll hear. We're working on it without giving any kind.
It's the traditional political answers on this shit. There's not really an answer there. They're just throwing in little tidbits of what they think people want to hear.
Here is Joe Biden. We have the clip on him too, Tommy. I don't want
I can't imagine
spend too much time waiting to cue it up, but let's see what Joe Biden says if we're ready on that one.
And the idea that instead of standing there and teaching a cop when there's an unarmed person coming at him with a knife or something to shoot him in the leg instead of in the heart is a very different thing. There's a lot of different things that can change.
Aim for the leg instead.
Yeah, Joe Biden says you're standing in front of a suspect. Shoot him in the leg, not the heart. Shoot him in the leg instead, says Joe Biden. Okay.
First of all, on training of that, use of deadly force training, if somebody's that close to me with a knife, I am authorized to shoot them at that point if they're coming at me in a threatening manner.
Within 21 feet, right?
Yeah, because they can close that gap on you really quick.
Yeah.
No, it depends. It's all incidental. With are they just holding the knife down to their side, or but. We should teach the cops to shoot people in the leg is ridiculous, because when you're using your weapon, your firearm, that's deadly force only, period.
Right.
We don't use firearms for less lethal force option by training officers to shoot them in the leg in a high stress situation. It's not going to happen. The accuracy is not that good when an officer is put under that much stress. What a ridiculous thing to say. And I'll say it now. I don't think I can vote for that man.
All right.
I really can't. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that Justin Amash, U.S. Representative Justin Amash, has introduced a bill that ends governmental immunity,
Sharmy, don't
which
get
is
ahead
an
of
actual
We're getting to that.
solution.
We're getting to this. So you may ask yourself, what is the data on the number of the ratios in statistics of black men being killed or black citizens being killed as it relates to white citizens? Now, I know that this discussion also parlays into economic distinctions as well, and you see in different parts of the state similar types of impacts on the community, not based on race, but based on economics. But nevertheless, you may ask yourself, what about these statistics? Do you know that only in 2014 were these statistics available because the federal government wasn't keeping them? And that, in fact, the Guardian news agency was the one that began keeping it, and that the former head of the FBI testified before Congress that he and the FBI are embarrassed, that it's ridiculous the federal government has no better information on police shootings than a database compiled by the Guardian, U.S., and the Washington Post. So when we talk about what are they doing about it, they don't even have statistics. Okay? Now let me tell you something about what happened in 1992. Nobody wants to hear about it because we've been working about it for this long. We're going to look at ourselves. We're going to figure this out. We don't even have statistics on it. In 1992, in the city of Detroit, a man named Malice Green was beaten to death with flashlights. He was coming out of a crack house, and these two officers, Larry Budson and Walter Nevers, on November 5th.
Larry Nevers and Walter Budson.
What is it? Walter Budson, Larry Nevers. Okay. They blunt force trauma to the head was the ruling. Okay. There was some interesting dynamics about this. This is right in and around the time of the Rodney King beating. This one actually happened beforehand. There was a lot of media drawn to it, and there was a lot of attention. But it continued on, obviously. What's interesting about the point I want to make about this is that it happened in the city of Detroit. There was a lot of issues with their conviction because For reasons that aren't clear, the jury, who was sequestered for this 5-month trial, watched the Spike Lee movie, which was X, where there's a scene of the Rodney King beating, which was the basis of both of their convictions being overturned ultimately. I think they went back and were retried, convicted again of involuntary manslaughter, did their time. And I think one of them continued to fight and may have been exonerated by the federal court at some point after spending a lot of time. But the point is that this was 1992, and then in 1997. So what was the reaction to the malice screen? What did the government do? What kind of training? What kind of moral compass measurement did they get out? What were they working on? What were they working on at that time? 1992. This is what they did. The state government. Now you got to understand, Recorder's Court is where this trial took place. It was it's the criminal court for the city of Detroit. The jurors were from the city of Detroit. Anyone charged with the crime in the city of Detroit went to this court, and all the judges that were elected from the Detroit population.
I think it's important to note, Michael, that because I didn't understand this at first about Recorder's Court, but that court, Recorder's Court in Detroit, heard felonies. So you had the Wayne County Circuit Court, and then you had Recorder's Court.
Correct. The jurisdiction I'm making, you got Detroit as part of Wayne County.
Right.
If you go to Warren, and someone commits a crime in Warren, there's the District Court of Warren, and then you go to the Macomb County Circuit Court. There's no Warren felony court, right? This is a unique aspect of this city, and they took great pride in it because whatever their volume of cases were, they resolved it very efficiently. They had a lot of trials. There was, and it was an evolving, unique circumstance. We could actually get a fair trial on occasion. So how did the government respond to this impact? They merged the Detroit court, that was its own entity. They said, what happened? 2 white cops got convicted of beating up a black guy. We're going to decimate that court. And they changed the voting, and they merged it into the Wayne County Circuit Court, thinking that the judges would be thrown off and voted out. They all retained their seats. And it ultimately blended. But it was a reaction to this event, unequivocally. And that's the work that they're doing. How does our government respond to that in 1992? By saying we're never going to let cops get convicted again because we're going to have quote-unquote out-county judges on these benches, and they're going to make sure and control these trials, and we're going to have out-county jurors on these trials if it happens again, and they're not going to convict. That's what happened. They got rid of Recorder's Court.
And those two didn't do much time at all.
They were in and out on appeals all over the place.
Yeah. Nope.
So,
and you know what? They have all these theories, right? But at the end of the day, this man engaged with these 2 police officers and ended up dead.
He came out of a crack house. The point is this. He came out.
That's the point, and that's the problem, is that it happens way too often. And like Michael said, I remember this vividly, and I was like 12. That was 28 years ago. I mean, this shit has been going on forever.
For 400 years, it's state-sponsored murder.
Right.
So here we go.
But we're free.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. Except when we're on quarantine there, Steve.
So
we're tied up in the court system.
The institution I'm talking about, let's just talk about some of the things that are inherent in the culture here. The police officers can lie in the course of their job. It's rewarded. Tricking someone into a confession is known as good police work. If you're a good undercover cop, it can blend in and lie and falsify your identity. You're considered a good police officer. That's part of the culture. Reward for that. And because of it, what has happened is this institution has monopolized the following negative, nefarious activities. They have monopolized lying, cheating, truth-telling, and most importantly, violence. Who are the only people that are allowed to commit violence and get away with it? They have monopolized this aspect. Now, I'm going to say that the entire government is to blame, but mostly the executive branch. Why is the executive branch most at fault? Because I'm speaking of the executive branch, we've got our prosecutors and our police that are part of this executive branch. And they have the most amount of discretion, whether they want to prosecute, whether they don't want to prosecute. They have discretion in terms of whether they want to arrest or not, whether they want to enforce law, whether they want to give a warning. This is the executive branch. But do not be mistaken that this branch works in unison. The police make the arrests, and they use their discretion of what crimes they're going to prosecute, arrest, and they bring it to the prosecutors. And the justice, the so-called justice, occurs when the prosecutors decide whether or not they want to bring charges. Sometimes they may not. Sometimes they might. But all that we're seeing, all the statistics I'm about to read to you, are because of these two pieces of the executive branch, the police and the prosecutors, that brought about and have created the greatest disparity and unfairness of disproportionate, unequivocal, institutionalized racism. What am I talking about? I mean, you could, there's a lot of statistics I can present, and they've been kept as terms of who is in prison, who is getting arrested. And it goes like this, that 40% of the prison population is black, despite the population of blacks in the United States being less than 10%. The amount of arrests for drug offenses for blacks is in the 30-40% zone, when in fact their population in nationally is less than 10%. This doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to be able to wrap it up because you guys kept interrupting. I'm taking a couple minutes. So here you go. So these are statistics and realities. How can this be? It didn't just happen by chance. There had to be a policy. There had to be the ability for people to. There had to be ability for people to, police officers to arrest and prosecute, and it wouldn't happen unless it was intentional. It's not by accident. Are we gonna? Do we want to take the break right now?
We'll just have to
Well,
shift
we're just
on
going to go
over
right to
for-
the llama.
No, we
to
gotta-
the llama.
Please go to the break.
We got to go to a break real quick, and then we're going to come back to our first guest.
Sweetfarms.org. Hopefully, we're going to be
Boom.
seeing
All right, I guess
Paco in just
all
a
right, there'll
moment.
be a part 2 to the
Looking forward
rant.
But it looks
Paco.
like
All right.
Sorry,
And part
Michael.
two
I
of
thought
the
I had some
Perhaps
quality addition to the
niblets.
content.
You're listening to
listening to
Planet Green
Michael.
Trees.
I didn't mean to.
The Planet Green Trees Show.